At my husband's birthday party, my 10-year-old daughter handed him a handmade gift. Mark smiled, then looked around the room and said, "Thanks," from Jessica's kid. The room laughed. Ellie's face turned crimson. Her eyes welled up. That's when I realized something. He didn't just deny my daughter. He erased her. And in that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. He would never get the chance to laugh at us again. If you've ever watched someone belittle your child like they don't belong, you know that pain never fades. But some stories don't end in silence. They end in justice. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe every child deserves to be seen, heard, and loved. I wasn't looking for love when I met Mark. After years of raising my daughter Ellie on my own, love had become more of a luxury than a necessity. I was focused on building my real estate career, growing my client base, and giving Ellie the life she deserved. One filled with security, stability, and maybe, just maybe, joy. Mark came into our lives like a breath of fresh air. He was charming, polite, and for the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not just as a single mom juggling showings and school pickups, but as a woman. He listened. He laughed at my sarcasm. He even helped Ellie with her math homework the first time they met. Ellie was only 7 then, soft-spoken, artistic, and a little shy. She had been through enough rejection from her biological father to make her cautious around new people. But with Mark, she slowly opened up. She started calling him Marky after a few months, and he never corrected her. We dated for over a year before getting married. It felt right. It felt like a second chance. Mark had been through a divorce himself. He said he understood how hard it was to blend families, and I believed him. When we bought our house together, a beautiful colonial on the edge of a quiet suburb, it felt like a new beginning. I even put him on the business registration as a symbolic gesture of our partnership. Though I still owned 100% of the shares in the real estate firm I'd built from scratch. The first few months were good, even great. We hosted game nights, went on family hikes, and Ellie seemed genuinely happy. But slowly, I started noticing cracks. Tiny, almost invisible cracks that only a mother's eye could catch. At family gatherings with Mark's relatives, he would always introduce me warmly, but when it came to Ellie, his tone changed. "This is Ellie," he'd say, "Jessica's daughter." Or worse, my wife's kid. Never my stepdaughter. Never our daughter. I brushed it off at first. Maybe he didn't want to overstep boundaries. Maybe he was still adjusting. But then there were the subtle exclusions. Family photo time? Mark would gently guide Ellie out of frame, saying things like, "Let's do just the core family for this one." Core family? I tried to bring it up once in private. I told him Ellie felt left out sometimes. His answer? "She's not mine, Jess. I'm doing my best, but she's not really my responsibility." That cut me deeper than I expected, because Ellie wasn't just my responsibility, she was my heart. But still, I stayed. I convinced myself things would get better, that maybe Mark just needed more time to bond with Ellie. I kept trying. I encouraged movie nights, dinners out, father-daughter days. And Ellie, bless her, kept trying too. She made him handmade cards, helped him clean his car, even painted a little picture of their new family, with all 3 of us smiling under a rainbow. Mark stuck it on the fridge for about a day. Then it disappeared. One day, I came home early from a showing and overheard Mark talking on the phone in the kitchen. He was laughing, saying, "No, man, I'm not stuck with some brat. She's just Jessica's kid, not mine." My blood went cold. Ellie was in the next room, pretending not to hear. But I knew she had. I started noticing how Ellie began withdrawing. Fewer jokes, less eye contact. She stopped leaving her little drawings around the house. She stopped calling him Marky. Still, I tried to keep the peace. I told myself that every blended family had growing pains. I told myself that Ellie needed stability more than she needed justice. I told myself to wait. until the day of Mark's birthday party. It was supposed to be a small family gathering, just close relatives, some neighbors, a little cake and wine. Ellie had spent a week working on a handmade wooden photo frame she'd painted herself. Inside, she put a picture of the three of us from our beach vacation. She was so proud. When she handed it to Mark, I watched her eyes shine with hope. Mark took it, held it up, and smiled. Then he looked at the room and said, "Well, thanks. From Jessica's kid." Laughter echoed around the living room like a slap. I saw Ellie's smile falter. Her cheeks turned red. Her little hands twisted in her lap as she sat down, silent. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. Not in rage, but in absolute crystalline clarity. He would never see her as his. But I would never let him make her feel like less than enough again. I didn't say anything that night. Not at the party, not when everyone laughed, not even when Ellie excused herself quietly and locked herself in her room. I stayed calm. I cleaned up plates. I poured wine. I smiled when people told Mark how lucky he was to have such a put-together wife. But inside, something was changing. Not like a storm, more like a tide, steady, rising, and unstoppable. That night, after the guests had left and the house was quiet, I knocked on Ellie's door. She was curled up in bed, facing the wall, the handmade frame lying upside down on her nightstand. "Can I come in?" I asked gently. She nodded, but didn't turn around. I sat beside her and waited. A minute passed. Then she whispered, "Why doesn't he like me?" I couldn't answer. I wanted to say, "He's just confused," or "He doesn't mean it," or "It'll get better." But none of those things were true, and Ellie deserved the truth, at least part of it. Instead, I said, "You are more than enough, baby. You are the best thing that's ever happened to me. And if someone can't see how lucky they are to know you, then that's their loss." She didn't reply, but I saw a tear roll down her cheek. She wiped it away fast, like she didn't want me to notice. That was the last tear I ever allowed her to shed because of him. The next morning, I woke up early and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look broken or angry. I looked focused. I had given Mark chances, so many chances, to step up, to do right by Ellie, to be a man worthy of the title husband, and maybe one day, dad. But instead, he chose indifference. He chose distance. He chose to humiliate a child who only ever wanted to be loved. That was the day I stopped being patient. I made my first move before breakfast. Quietly, I logged into the secure account where my real estate company's documentation was stored. Years ago, I'd included Mark's name on the business registration form, mostly for show, but I still owned 100% of the company shares. Now, I filed a formal update, removing him from any mention in the public-facing branding. Just a small change, one he wouldn't notice right away, but it was the first domino. Then I started documenting. I knew how the legal system worked. As a businesswoman, I'd sat through enough contract negotiations and property disputes to know that proof is everything. So I began recording. Subtle things at first. Conversations where he downplayed Ellie's role in the family, dismissed her feelings, or mocked her interests. I never prompted him. I didn't have to. He was comfortable being careless. He once told a friend on speakerphone, "It's not like she's mine. I'm not going to waste money on some random kid's therapy." I saved the audio file. Another time, he asked me if I could get Ellie to stop calling him Marky in public because it made him look soft. Saved. I documented it all: dates, context, tone, and effect. At night, I began meeting with a divorce attorney, a sharp, experienced woman named Linda who specialized in high-asset separations. I told her everything. She didn't flinch. "You've already done the hardest part," Linda said. "You've stopped hoping he'll change. Now it's about strategy." We mapped out a plan that spanned weeks. First, protect all my assets. Retitle the house under a trust in my name, freeze shared credit accounts, and open separate financial records. Second, gather as much evidence as possible of emotional neglect, especially as it related to Ellie. While it wouldn't directly affect the division of property, it would matter in court. Judges notice patterns. Third, keep him unaware until I was ready. Smile, nod, cook dinner, pretend I was still the agreeable, supportive wife he thought he married. And that was the easiest part, because I no longer felt anger. I felt resolve. Every time he referred to Ellie as your kid in public, I smiled politely. Every time he skipped her art show or forgot her birthday, I made a mental note. Every time he posted family photos that cropped her out, I screenshotted them and added them to the folder marked intentional exclusion. He had no idea. He thought I was still grateful to be married to a man like him. He once said, "You know, a lot of guys wouldn't take on a woman with a kid. You're lucky I did." I nearly laughed. Lucky? The man was walking on a glass floor, and I was holding the hammer. It began with silence. Not avoidance, strategic silence. I didn't argue. I didn't correct him. I didn't beg him to treat Ellie better. I let him think he'd won some invisible war. That I'd given up trying. But in truth, I was drawing the blueprint for his downfall. The first step was legal. I filed the house under a private trust in my name, one I'd prepared years ago when I first started my real estate firm. I moved our business finances, everything from commissions to escrow accounts, into a separate LLC I'd created, one with no visible ties to Mark. I even changed the firm's name subtly, rebranding from J&M Realty to Eden & Coden. Eden was Ellie's middle name. He never noticed. Next, I found a therapist, not for me, but for Ellie, a licensed child psychologist who specialized in blended family trauma. I didn't tell Mark. I scheduled sessions on weekends when he was off golfing with his brother. Ellie, always perceptive, asked why she needed therapy. "Because your feelings matter," I told her, "and you deserve someone who listens." She didn't say anything then, but after her second session, she hugged me tighter than she had in months. While Ellie healed, I kept collecting. One evening, I accidentally left my phone recording on the kitchen counter while Mark talked to his cousin over a beer. "I swear, if she keeps pushing that kid on me, I might just walk," he said, laughing. "It's not my fault the brat's got daddy issues." I labeled that file Brat Daddy Issues Wave. He made it so easy. He wasn't cruel in the loud, obvious way. He was dismissive, casual, smug. The kind of emotional neglect that leaves no bruises, only slow-growing scars. And that's what made it so believable in court. It sounded real. Because it was. Then came the friends. Quietly, I began reconnecting with people I had distanced myself from during the marriage, former colleagues, mutual acquaintances, even my ex-business partner Trina, whom Mark never liked. I told them nothing outright, just invited them for coffee, rebuilt bridges, let them see I was still here, still strong. One of them, a mortgage broker named Kevin, pulled me aside after a networking event and said, "I don't know what's going on, but if you ever need a second opinion on asset protection, I've got a guy." I smiled. "I might take you up on that." Every move I made was quiet, calculated, and coated in charm. To Mark, I was still the wife who packed his lunches and laughed at his jokes. I praised him in public, smiled at dinners, made his favorite meals. He had no idea I'd memorized every pin, scanned every document, and backed up every account. The only person who sensed something was different was Ellie. She started watching me more closely, like she saw something changing but didn't know what. I reassured her, gently but clearly. "I'm just making sure we're safe," I said. "From what?" she asked. I didn't answer. She didn't press. Then, one afternoon, I tested the waters. I invited Mark to lunch, just the two of us, and brought up the idea of putting Ellie into a private art program over the summer, something she'd been dreaming about. He laughed. "Why? Waste of money. She's not going to be the next Picasso. That was the last confirmation I needed. Not just of who he was, but of what I was about to do. Because I wasn't just leaving him. I was going to dismantle everything he thought he had, piece by piece, while he still believed he was in control. Mark noticed something was off the day his credit card got declined at the gas station. He came home furious, tossing the card onto the kitchen counter. "Is the bank down or something?" he asked. I barely looked up from the pasta I was stirring. "Maybe. You could call them?" He did. I listened from the hallway as the bank rep told him that his name had been removed from our joint account 2 weeks ago. He stormed into the kitchen, red-faced. "You moved money without telling me?" I set down the spoon slowly. "No, Mark. I moved my money." He stared at me, unsure whether to shout or pretend he misunderstood. I gave him nothing. No rage, no fear, not even annoyance. Just calm, quiet clarity. From that point on, the unraveling began. He tried logging into our home security system to adjust the thermostat. Password changed. He attempted to check the business CRM to monitor commissions. Access denied. The business email he sometimes used? Deactivated. He confronted me again, this time angrier. "What the hell is going on?" I handed him a printout of the new company structure. It listed me as sole owner and operator. No mention of him. I didn't say a word, just let him read. "You said this company was ours." I looked at him directly. "No, I said I built it. You posed next to it." He stared at me, dumbfounded. "You're being dramatic. Over what? Because I don't baby your kid like you want me to?" I smiled. "Exactly. You never treated her like yours. So now, nothing here is yours either." He didn't sleep in our bed that night. A few days later, he tried damage control. Flowers showed up at the office. He cooked dinner. He even asked Ellie about her latest painting. She barely looked at him. Then he played his favorite card, pity. He came into my office one evening, voice low and wounded. "You know, this feels like betrayal. Like you planned all this behind my back." I looked up from my laptop. "Funny. That's exactly how Ellie felt every time you called her just Jessica's kid." His jaw tightened. He left without another word. That weekend, he invited his family over. Unannounced. They arrived with casseroles and polite smiles, clearly on some sort of intervention mission. I sat through it all. His sister suggesting couples counseling, his mother mentioning how family is about compromise. Then Mark said it. "I just want us to go back to how things were." That's when I realized he truly believed I was bluffing. I stood, walked to the cabinet, and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Inside were copies of the voice recordings, screenshots of texts, and a summary of every instance of emotional neglect I had documented. I handed it to him in front of his family. "I've filed for divorce. This is your preview." Silence. His mother looked like she'd seen a ghost. His brother mumbled something about needing air. Mark stood up, shaking. "You're doing this here?" "You brought your family into our home uninvited," I said. "Now they get to see the truth." Ellie came downstairs just then, holding her sketch pad. She paused at the foot of the stairs, watching. Mark looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in weeks. He opened his mouth, maybe to say something, maybe to save face. But she turned around and walked back upstairs without a word, and I followed. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, deliberate, and devastatingly precise. If you've ever had to protect your child from someone who never deserved a place in their life, this story is for you. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe silence can be the sharpest blade. After the envelope incident, Mark retreated. Not out of shame, no, that would have required self-awareness. He retreated like a man regrouping, calculating his next move. For the first time, he realized he wasn't in control. And that terrified him. The divorce papers were officially served the following week. He called me 3 times that day, left 2 voicemails. In the first, he sounded angry. In the second, desperate. I didn't respond to either. Instead, I focused on what mattered: Ellie. She'd become more alive these past few weeks, brighter somehow, like she could finally breathe. She painted again. She smiled without hesitation. One night, I found her humming while brushing her hair. It had been years since I heard that sound. Meanwhile, Linda, my lawyer, kept moving swiftly. She filed motions to protect all personal and business assets. The evidence we'd compiled was thorough, airtight, but there was still one last piece we needed: a setting. A moment not just for legal resolution, but emotional truth. Mark's family was hosting their annual fall gathering, a big outdoor dinner at his parents' estate. It was the one event every year where the entire family came together. Traditionally, I was the one who organized the wine, the seating chart, even the playlist. This year, I said nothing. 3 days before the event, Mark texted, "Are you coming to the family dinner? They'd really like to see you and Ellie." I stared at the screen for a long time. He still thought this was salvageable, that if I just smiled and wore a polite dress, we could sweep it all under the rug. Again. I replied, "We'll be there, and we have something to say." He didn't respond. The night before the dinner, I met with Linda one last time. She reviewed the statements, the final disclosures, the recordings. Everything was ready. "You understand," she said. "This isn't about making a scene. It's about ending one." "I'm not going to yell," I said. "I'm going to finish." At home, I packed Ellie's favorite outfit, a pale blue dress with tiny sunflowers stitched near the hem. She used to call it her sunshine dress. She hadn't worn it in over a year. That morning, she didn't ask questions. She just got dressed, held my hand, and walked out the door with me, strong, steady, ready. Mark greeted us at the gate like nothing had happened, like we were still his polished little family. I kissed his cheek out of habit and strategy. "You look beautiful," he said to me. I smiled. "You won't think that in 10 minutes. The backyard was strung with fairy lights and folding tables, just like every year. Children ran across the grass. Adults balanced glasses of sangria and paper plates piled with roast beef and mashed potatoes. Mark's mother gave me a stiff hug, clearly unsure where we stood. His sister asked about Ellie but didn't make eye contact. It didn't matter. They would all understand soon enough. Ellie stayed close by my side, quiet but calm. I had never been prouder of her. About halfway through dinner, Mark stood to make a toast. Classic Mark, take the spotlight before anyone else could. He tapped his glass and smiled wide. "I just want to thank everyone for being here. Family means a lot, especially these days. And I want to acknowledge my beautiful wife, Jessica, for always keeping things together." There were polite claps, some cheers. Mark glanced at me with that familiar look, self-satisfied, smug, like he thought this performance earned him forgiveness. I rose slowly, holding a small stack of printed papers in one hand and my phone in the other. "Actually," I said, loud enough for the table to quiet, "I'd like to say something too." Mark's smile wavered. Around us, chairs shifted, eyes turned. I looked directly at his parents, then his siblings. "Many of you have known me for years. You've eaten at my table, watched Ellie grow. You've asked about my business, our vacations, our family. But what you don't know is what's been happening behind closed doors." I pulled the first sheet from the stack. This is a transcript of Mark referring to my daughter as a brat with daddy issues. That was on a speakerphone call, right in front of her bedroom. Murmurs broke out. I raised my phone. "And here's an audio file," his voice, crystal clear, saying, "She's not mine, and I'm not wasting money on her therapy." I let it play. For 7 seconds the words hung in the air like smoke. Mark stood frozen, pale. "Jessica," I cut him off. "No, Mark, you've had years to speak. Tonight, I speak for her." I turned to Ellie, who was sitting at the end of the table watching me, wide-eyed but steady. You were never just Jessica's kid. You are mine, fully, proudly, forever. And no one, especially not a man too weak to love a child, gets to define your worth. Ellie's lip trembled, but she didn't cry. I turned back to the family. For those of you who laughed when he dismissed her, who stayed silent when she was left out of family photos, your silence made room for this. But our silence ends here. With that, I gathered the papers, picked up my purse, and held out my hand. Ellie stood, took it, and we walked out together. No yelling, no begging, no looking back, just the sound of chairs scraping and a long, stunned silence behind us. The next morning, our house felt different. Not quieter, cleaner, lighter. Like a weight had been lifted from the air, one we'd all grown used to carrying without noticing. Mark didn't come home that night. I wasn't surprised. My attorney had already filed for temporary separation of residence, and the locks were changed before breakfast. Ellie slept in. I let her. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and looked out at the backyard, the same place where we used to host family barbecues and pretend everything was fine. Now, it was just a patch of grass. No pretense, no performance, just space. Space we could finally breathe in. That week, I made the changes official. I signed the final document severing Mark's name from every legal tie: property, business, finances. My company, Eden & Company, was now solely mine in every sense. Clients responded better to the rebranding than I'd expected. One even said, "Feels warmer now, like it really reflects you." Linda, my lawyer, called to confirm that the preliminary hearing was moving in our favor. Thanks to the detailed records and the clear documentation of emotional neglect, Mark's attempt to claim any portion of my business was denied outright. He would walk away with what he brought in, almost nothing. He texted once, "You're destroying everything over a kid who's not even yours." I didn't reply, because he was wrong. Ellie was everything. And what I destroyed wasn't a family, it was a facade. At Ellie's next therapy session, she asked her psychologist if it was okay to feel relieved. The therapist smiled and said, "Relief is your body saying thank you." At home, Ellie started calling me Mom again, like she used to when it was just us. She began painting more, big, bold strokes, brighter colors. Her latest piece was of a house on a hill, surrounded by sunflowers. No shadows, no dark corners. I framed it and hung it in our new office. Because yes, our office. I took over a quiet commercial space downtown, decorated it with soft lighting, art by Ellie, and a small bookshelf filled with women-written business books. It became more than a workplace. It became a symbol of starting over on our terms. One evening, while locking up, Ellie slipped her hand into mine and asked, "Is it okay that I'm happy?" I crouched to her level and looked her in the eyes. "Baby, being happy is not a betrayal. It's your right." She nodded. And then she did something she hadn't done in years. She twirled, just once, like a sunflower chasing sunlight. That was the moment I knew. The healing had begun. That summer, I took Ellie to Europe. It wasn't a grand whirlwind tour. It was simple, intentional. We walked cobblestone streets in Prague, tasted gelato every afternoon in Florence, and stood quietly in front of Monet's water lilies in Paris. She sketched everything, not for anyone else, for herself. I watched her shoulders relax, her laugh grow freer, her voice louder. Each day, she walked a little taller. She no longer looked like a girl trying to shrink into the background. She looked like someone returning to herself. One afternoon in Vienna, we found a quiet cafe tucked between bookshops. Ellie pulled out her sketch pad while I sipped coffee and read. She didn't say anything at first. Then she turned the page toward me. It was a new drawing, a recreation of the handmade gift she had given Mark all those months ago. The same frame, the same photo. But this time, at the bottom, she had written, "From Jessica's daughter." No quotation marks, no step, just truth. I felt my throat tighten. She smiled at me shyly. "I thought it should belong to us now." And it did. Every part of it. That night, I wrote in my journal, a habit I'd picked up again after years of silence. Some men break women without laying a hand. They do it with absence, with mockery, with silence. But sometimes, a woman remembers who she is, and she burns the whole thing down, not in anger, but in honor. Back home, things were quiet. Mark moved out of state, and as far as I know, into another relationship within weeks. I heard through a mutual friend that he called me vindictive and crazy. That's fine, let him. It takes a certain kind of man to call a woman crazy just because she finally stopped accepting crumbs. But here's the truth. This was never about revenge. It was about recognition. About Ellie knowing she was never invisible. About me reclaiming the woman I was before I settled for less. People always say blended families are complicated. They are. But love, real love, isn't. Real love doesn't make you feel small at the dinner table. It doesn't crop you out of pictures. It doesn't silence your name. Real love sees you, claims you, lifts you. And sometimes the greatest justice you can give a child is to walk away from the ones who refuse to. Today, our home is smaller, but warmer. The laughter is real. The silences are safe. And the door? It's wide open. But only for those who know how to love out loud.